It is finally happening. The Supreme Court is hearing the landmark case of Louisiana versus Callais. And this case, if ruled on correctly by the Supreme Court, and it looks like it likely will be, this case will be a landmark, massive victory for the GOP, the Republican Party, and an incredibly massive loss for the Democrats. This is the case re-examining the Voting Rights Act, covering racial gerrymandering across America. And if you're a liberal right now, oh my God, you're about to be crying. So, President Donald Trump, would you please pour me a glass of the liberal tears?
You got it, American advocates. Liberal tears are so refreshing.
And it truly is so refreshing indeed, President. Thank you very much. Those liberal tears are about to be delicious. They're going to be crying over this. They are set to lose bigly after the Supreme Court is done here. Let me explain to you why. Let's start first of all with the state of Louisiana. This is the districting of the state, and why the Supreme Court case is Louisiana versus Callais, because Louisiana has brought this to the Supreme Court's attention. The blue that you can see there are two racially gerrymandered districts, and these districts were drawn intentionally to overrepresent black people from within the state. Minorities, but black people mostly. And you can see District 2, not necessarily the most egregiously drawn congressional district, but look at District 6. Extending all the way from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, smack dab in the middle of the state almost, all the way up with these narrow lines that allow it to keep going to Shreveport. That is so egregious, so ridiculous when you actually see how it's drawn. People don't understand how egregious the Democrats have been with this. The Democrats have been taking advantage of crap like this for years, and they've been using the Voting Rights Act and purposely misinterpreting it, by the way, to take advantage of red states. They literally take red states like Louisiana or other ones to court and sue them in order to force them to comply with racially drawn gerrymandered districts like this, like District 6 of Louisiana. That's how the Democrats have been playing this game for years now. And here's another example right here. You have Louisiana on the left, right? And then you have Missouri, which is a typically very Republican state, I would say. Missouri has been completely dominated by racial gerrymandering. You can see both the blue districts there, where once again, they have just forced this racial gerrymandering upon another deep South state that is clearly Republican. And it doesn't even just end with racial gerrymandering. What you have to realize is the Democrats use this strategy in combination with other dirty, underhanded tactics like flooding America full of illegal immigrants via the open borders that we saw during the Biden presidency. And while they claim that these illegal immigrants can't vote, we've seen all evidence to the contrary ever since. I mean, let's add it all up what's going on here. First of all, we have the voting machines, which glitch out all the time in a very shady way. On top of that, we have the mail-in ballot scam, which is very questionable, very corrupt, opens the window for all kinds of cheating to happen, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I'm not here to state that it's already taken place, but mail-in ballots just cannot be kept secure at a massive level like what was attempted during 2020, for instance. It's just not possible. We cannot continue to allow mail-in ballots to be a thing in this country for the long-term health and trustworthiness of our future elections. But the Democrats love mail-in ballots, and they love the voting machines. They also love open borders and flooding our country with illegal immigrants. And of course, they love these racially gerrymandered districts in deep South states, in red states specifically, not to mention the fact that they've already gerrymandered the hell out of their blue states as it is. I'm going to cover that in just a little bit here because they've squeezed that lemon completely dry. They've made their lemonade years ago, and they've been sipping on it and enjoying it ever since. But that cup is drying out, and our cup, full of liberal tears, is only just starting to get poured as the Republicans finally use their own strategy against them, the Democrats' own strategy against them, and now are seeking to rebalance all of these districts. It's beautiful. I've been waiting for this day to happen where the Supreme Court finally heard the oral arguments against all of this, and they started hearing them today. And I also just want to point something out here too. Bear in mind that we had mail-in ballots, we had racially gerrymandered districts, we had voting machines that are glitchy and full of possible fraud, in all honesty. We had open borders for 4 years during the Biden presidency. And with all of that being said, Trump still won back in November. So if you ask me, do Democrats deserve more representation when they had all of that going for them and still managed to lose? Or do they deserve less representation to better reflect the way America voted back in November? I think the answer is pretty obvious. However, there are a couple of hurdles to face here, though they're not very large ones, thankfully, when it comes to the Supreme Court. But Ketanji Brown Jackson. This was the first ever black woman appointed to the Supreme Court. And of course, she was appointed as, to be honest with you, a DEI appointment from Joe Biden himself, who had faced backlash about being a racist based off of conversations that he had before Congress in the 1990s when the Democrat Party was a lot different then. And so to prove that he wasn't a racist president, a racist white man, Joe Biden appointed Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, unfortunately. And it does come back to bite us all the time, including today when they were hearing the oral arguments in the case of Louisiana versus Callais against Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Ketanji Brown Jackson, of course, made ridiculous arguments that I'm sure in her mind she considered to be incredibly strong ones. But she's, of course, arguing in favor of racial gerrymandering and racially drawn congressional districts. Her argument in all of this, her main argument, this is the highlight of the day here, was that black people are the equivalent of disabled people when it comes to voting. And that's why we need racial gerrymandering in America. I'm not making this up. Take a listen to her own words because all of this was recorded.
I guess I'm thinking of it, of the fact that remedial action, absent discriminatory intent, is really not a new idea in the civil rights laws. And my kind of paradigmatic example of this is something like the ADA. Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act against the backdrop of a world that was generally not accessible to people with disabilities. And so it was discriminatory in effect because these folks were not able to access these buildings. And it didn't matter whether the person who built the building or the person who owned the building intended for them to be exclusionary. That's irrelevant. Congress said the facilities have to be made equally open to people with disabilities if readily possible. I guess I don't understand why that's not what's happening here. The idea in Section 2 is that we are responding to current day manifestations of past and present decisions that disadvantage minorities and make it so that they don't have equal access to the voting system, right? They're disabled. In fact, we use the word disable in Milligan. We say that's a way in which you see that these processes are not equally open.
Now, I don't know about you, but, you know, when I've voted and when I've gone to vote where I live and I stand in line, I see black people lined up to vote. They don't look disabled to me. They look like they're enthusiastic like everyone else is to go out and vote. So I don't know what she's talking about here, but she's an embarrassment to the Supreme Court using an argument like that. That's for sure. And this was going viral today on X because she literally did make the distinction that black people are the equivalent of disabled people, which is absolutely absurd. But there she is saying it anyway, shamelessly, on the Supreme Court as an argument for why racial gerrymandering must be upheld in America. Because apparently without it, black people just won't be represented. It doesn't make sense, but there she is saying it. It got even worse, though, however, for Ketanji Brown Jackson. She continued to embarrass herself during these arguments and honestly almost wound up losing her temper as the day went on while they were hearing these oral arguments. We had Benjamin Aguinaga here. He's the Louisiana Solicitor General, and he was making the argument that racial gerrymandering actually goes against the Constitution. What was his source for this argument? Well, it was the Constitution itself. Specifically, Ben was using the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution to argue against racial gerrymandering, where he was making the point that this is just reverse discrimination now, and that lawsuits will only continue to come their way if racial gerrymandering is upheld. If Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is upheld, at least the interpretation of it by the Democrats is upheld, and racial gerrymandering persists because it's racial discrimination. And you cannot just set out to deliberately overrepresent people based off of skin color at that point. It's still just discrimination. And so while he was using the Constitution to make his argument, Ketanji Brown Jackson decided to step in as she was getting really, really upset at him for this. And she started arguing back. What was her source for her argumentation, though? Was she arguing based off of constitutional interpretation? Did she cite specific sources in her argumentation against him? No. Her actual source, the actual basis of her argumentation for why racial gerrymandering is appropriate and necessary, is because they're underrepresented. And when questioned on it, she literally says, just trust me. She's a Supreme Court judge. And her source is just trust me, bro. Take a listen.
Jackson.
Wait, so can I just ask, why is that not a compelling state interest to identify areas in which that problem is occurring?
Your Honor, of course, as this court recognized in SFFA, states can remedy intentional
No, I'm not talking about the
discrimination.
remedy. I'm talking
they
about
can
the identify.
Of course.
All right. So if I'm right that Section 2 is about identifying the problem and then requiring some remedy, I don't understand why your answer to Justice Kagan's question about is this a compelling state interest is no. The answer is obviously yes, that you have an interest in remedying the effects of racial discrimination that we identify using this tool. Whether you go too far in your remedy is another issue, right?
Your Honor, I think step zero in all of these cases, it was certainly step zero in the Robinson litigation, is the plaintiffs came in and said, we want another majority black district.
I thought they came in and said, we are not receiving equal electoral opportunity because our votes are being diluted.
Which is the same way of saying we deserve a second
No,
majority
it's
black
not,
district.
because that, again, just trust me on this. The second electoral or second district is a remedy that one could offer for a problem that we've identified. And the whole Robinson litigation was about identifying the problem.
So there you have it. Just trust me on this, okay? Trust me, I'm a Supreme Court judge. That makes me more correct than you, is essentially the argument. It's absurd. She's an embarrassment. And it's a shame, truly a shame, that Joe Biden was able to appoint someone like her to the Supreme Court. She's going to be a pain in the ass, unfortunately, for likely decades to come. Thankfully, the rest of the Supreme Court, for the most part, is more sound than that and able to be reasoned with at the very least. But it actually got even crazier than that. There was this crazy attorney by the name of Janai Nelson who wound up also delivering an oral argument in favor of racial gerrymandering. And she says the quiet part out loud. Just wait till you hear this. But before I show you that, President Donald Trump has something to say. It's another quiet part out loud here when it comes to this channel. So take a listen real fast.
Be sure to subscribe to American Advocates if you enjoy liberal tears like us.
Thank you, President Donald Trump. I am truly flattered by that. And I love you, man. You're the best president of all time. But now, on to Attorney General Janai Nelson here, where she basically states that the reason why racial gerrymandering is important is because white Democrats would not vote for black politicians, even if those black politicians were Democrat.
That's right. And in the state of Louisiana, that analysis was conducted in the Nairn case. And it was clear that regardless of party, white Democrats were not voting for black candidates, whether they were Democrats or not. And we know that there is such a significant chasm between how black and white voters vote in Louisiana that there's no question that even if there is some correlation between race and party, that race is the driving factor.
They're just shamelessly having to make this argument now because this is a last-ditch effort on their part to hold on to their overrepresentation that allows them all of this undeserved political power in America. And so shamelessly, you just have this attorney saying it, saying the quiet part out loud now. They have nothing left to lose, and so you're going to hear insane arguments from them over this. They're forced now to admit what all of this is truly about. It's ridiculous. But even more so, I want to point something else out. Is what she's saying a good point? Perhaps it is. But you know, Louisiana is only one of the southern states down there. Let's take a look at another southern state right now, like Florida. This is Byron Donalds, who is the Republican candidate running to be the next governor of Florida after Ron DeSantis. Does he have the same issues down there as what that attorney, Janai, was talking about? Will white people vote for Byron Donalds? Well, turns out, yeah, white people will vote for Byron Donalds. Right now, 63 members of the Florida State House of Representatives, which is, of course, 75% of the total Florida House GOP caucus, have officially endorsed Byron Donalds for governor in 2026. On top of that, here's what the polling looks like currently for Byron Donalds. He's crushing his primary lead, currently at 57%. He's just dominating the other Republican candidates, with 38% still being unsure. Most of those will shift right over to Byron Donalds. I am sure of that. President Donald Trump himself has endorsed Byron Donalds to be the next governor of Florida. And so that leads me to the conclusion, of course, that white people not voting for black candidates is strictly a Democrat issue. Surprise, surprise. It's almost as if the Democrat Party is incredibly racist. But that can't be true, can it? I don't know. If you know your history, then I'm sure you'll be able to comment down below what your thoughts and opinions are on that. Be sure to let me know. But on to perhaps the most exciting transformation that we could wind up witnessing if Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is struck down by the Supreme Court. Look at that before on the left there. That's currently what we're dealing with when it comes to these racially drawn districts all across the Deep South. Afterwards, on the right, the plausible scenario, look at that. You want to talk about a red tsunami. It is a thing of beauty. Because the thing is, Democrats have currently 19 racially gerrymandered districts across America. And if this Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is struck down, Republicans could gain at least a dozen districts back and very likely could gain all 19 back. We are at a position right now where the Democrats might continually lose the House of Representatives for the next 20 years plus because they're so unpopular and so unfavorable. And let me tell you something right now. CNN is panicking over this. They're going off about all of the districts that Republicans, the GOP, will gain if the Supreme Court rules correctly on this compared to what the Democrats can gain. You can already see in the still of it. It's hilarious. And why is that? It's because the Democrats have already squeezed the lemon dry. They've been gerrymandering for years now, all of these blue states. There's nothing left. California with Gavin Newsom, they're trying to fight back. They got Proposition 50, which is basically them demanding that the Californians turn over the right to redistrict their state to state authorities, to politicians, so that Gavin Newsom himself can get his grimy, greasy paws after he's done spreading all of his hair gel. He can then try to hold on to a pen in his hand and redraw, probably very sloppily on a map, the new lines where he will squeeze out more Republican representation, undeservedly so, by the way. But that's about it. They can't fight us on this. They've already done this, and now we're doing it back, and they're powerless to do anything about it. Take a look at this.
So this is what the party pickups would be for congressional districts. Republicans, 5. Missouri, 1. North Carolina, 1. Ohio, 2 or 3. Indiana, 1 or 2. Florida, still discussion down there, but that could be another gold mine for them if they tipped it even further their way. Kansas, 1. New Hampshire, 1. And Nebraska. Democrats, Utah, California, Maryland. Look at this. If you offset California and Texas, Missouri and Utah, North Carolina and Maryland, everything left over is an advantage to the Republicans. And don't forget, the Supreme Court is considering what could really be the end of the Voting Rights Act, which would protect minority groups. So you don't have a state that's half black, for example, that elects only one congressional member and everybody else goes to the Republicans that would represent that population in some ways. So if that is gutted, Democrats could lose 19 seats. This would be a huge amount. But this is also a measure of how much the White House is concerned about this, because Donald Trump knows if the Democrats get the House again, there could be new investigations just like last time. There could be a new impeachment. There could be a lot of impediment to these plans that right now the Republicans in the House and Senate are letting run like a freight train.
And that ending there is very true, and why it's actually going to be critical that Republicans go out en masse next year, and even for some of the states this year where elections are happening, and vote. Be sure to vote. Your vote truly does matter, and it's important to vote not just for the president. It doesn't end there. In fact, in many ways, voting in your state and local elections is more important for your own quality of life. The president can only do so much to improve your quality of life at a national level. It's vital, of course, but at a state and local level, that is where your day-to-day life is the most affected. So go out and vote if you're a Republican. If you're a Democrat, then, I mean, do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you not to vote, but, you know, I wish that you wouldn't. And also, 19 seats could be lost by Democrats. That's just from this Supreme Court hearing alone, they're actually poised to lose even more than that. By my calculations, currently, they could lose 27 total seats. And I've got some future videos coming up where we're going to include more CNN footage of them freaking out, pointing out just how unpopular the Democrats are, how very likely they're going to lose the House in 2026, even more so. They won't regain it back. And I'm going to go over some states that could very likely wind up going from blue to red. We're seeing it all happen right now. The shift is coming, in my opinion. And I do believe we will see a second red wave for the 2026 midterm election. So be on the lookout for that video. Be sure to subscribe right now to American Advocates and turn on the bell icon next to the subscription. That's what will notify you when I post these videos. However, if you use as much gel in your hair as Gavin Newsom does, then please be sure to dislike this video and never come back. Finally, I want to leave you guys off with this. This is the ultimate argumentation against the Democrats currently saying, oh my God, the Republicans are just racially gerrymandering now. It's so corrupt what they're doing. They're cheating to win. They're changing the rules so they can hold on to power. Well, let's take a look at just how bad the Democrats have gerrymandered a lot of these states. So what we have here, 36% Republican in Massachusetts, yet Republicans hold 0 seats. 42% Republican in Connecticut, yet Republicans hold 0 seats. 46% Republican in Maine, yet they hold 0 seats. 46% Republican again in New Mexico, 0 seats. 48% Republican in New Hampshire, 0 seats. 42% Republican in Rhode Island, 0 seats. 32% Republican in Vermont, 0 seats. 38% Republican in Hawaii, 0 seats. And 42% Republican in Delaware, 0 seats. But the Democrats want to complain about Republicans trying to strike down racial gerrymandering and redistrict the lines. This post also points out, it says, also, as to some of the blue states that were benevolent enough, that's being said sarcastically, of course, to give us a smidgen. California, 38% Republican, only 9 out of 52 seats, which is 20% only, so underrepresented. Illinois, 44% Republican, yet only 3 out of 17 seats are Republican. That's only 17% instead of 44%. Big discrepancy. 43% Republican in New York. That's actually shocking. And yet Republicans only hold 7 out of the 26 seats for 26.9% total. Maryland, 34% Republican, yet they only hold 1 out of 8 seats for 12.5% representation. New Jersey, 46% Republican. That's going to be one of the states to watch. I'm telling you, be sure to stay tuned for my next video because it's going to be a shocking turn of events, I think. 46% Republican, yet they only hold 3 out of 12 seats, 25%. And then Oregon, 41% Republican in Oregon, yet only 1 out of 6 seats held at 16%. And so if you're a Democrat and you're honestly trying to argue at this point that the Republicans are being scum about this and changing the rules to hold on to power, then honestly, it's not the Republicans who are scum. It's you who's scum. You're disingenuous and you're not arguing in good faith. We're now finally no longer beholden by the rules of the old school GOP. We don't need to walk so uprighteously anymore to play by our rule book, even if you're not willing to. Republicans are simply meeting you at your level and playing to win, and Democrats can't stand it. But at the end of the day, winning is all that matters, and that's why we have the president in office that we currently have in. He understands this concept, and now it seems like most Republicans are finally starting to grasp it too. Thanks so much for watching, and glory to America. God bless the USA.